Welcome back to Strange Stories with the Seeker and the Skeptic. So this episode, we are going to be speaking with author Donald Rumer-Rivera. He has recently published The Ultimate Power Within, Unleashing the Magic of Affirmations. It's a new thought book that endeavors to help you take control of your own life and reality. Thanks for talking with us today, Donald.
Oh, thanks for inviting me in. I'm looking forward to it.
Now,
Absolutely.
just in case some of our listeners are not super up on what affirmation really means in this context, what are affirmations?
Well, I'm going to give you the a quote unquote traditional version, and then I'm also going to give you the version that I am trying to make case for in my book. Okay, so it's going to be it's a twofold answer. The first one is very simply this: an affirmation is a positive, repetitive statement that you use to help, hopefully, bring about a positive change in you and to help you kind of get over something or to deal with something or whatever it is. And in other words, it's internal, and that's what your mom and your grandmom and everybody in the past has always gone with affirmations. And I at first, when I started thinking about affirmations and when that first registered with me, I also believed in that, but I came to understand that there is a more scientific basis for affirmations, which in the research that I did for the book helped me to prove the basis for which I now argue affirmations are. An affirmation in my new kind of paradigm is that it is still a positive statement. It's got to be a present positive statement. And that present positive statement is present in the moment of success. So again, if you set your destination, if you set your success, you set your goal, and you say, I want to be, we don't say, I want to be. And so again, an affirmation is a statement set in the successful present. You repeat it often, at least 3 times a day, in my opinion. You write it specific, present tense, positive, and make sure that when you say it, you mean it, meaning you say it. And as you do that, you affect the change not only in you, but in your environment based on your energy that is around you. And as that energy then touches somebody else in the ripple effect, it then changes them, and therefore they change and they change and they change. It's like that. You tell 2 friends, they tell 2 friends. So in other words, to me nowadays, an affirmation is a positive present statement repeated continuously to help you affect the change not only in you, but in your environment. That's the new change. Little long there, but I think you see where I'm headed.
No, it makes a lot of sense to me. It's thinking a new reality. And so it's affecting the change in your energy system, like you said. What inspired you to start doing this kind of research and writing this book?
Well, it actually, to go back a little bit to help people understand where I'm coming from, is I'm coming right now from a metaphysical basis. And so often when people hear, oh God, this is a woo-woo guy, this is a guy who's out there. Believe me, I was that other person who thought this is a woo-woo guy, turn the knob, I don't want to hear anymore. However, I was an engineer first. I was in engineering initially in my career. And then from engineering, I moved into law. That's a big jump in itself and a whole long story. And we don't have time for it, but the short version is that the engineering gave me a basis in science. And then the science, because I was a computer engineer. And so we learned about ones and zeros, ASCII and all that kind of stuff. We learned about energy. We learned about power. I have a better understanding of energy and power than a number of people may think. And so therefore, I brought that scientific background, and then I became a lawyer. And now I have this reasoning background, an ability to put down a case to say, hey, this is how you prove your case. This is how you persuade folks. And then ultimately you get hopefully the result you want as an attorney with a not guilty verdict or, a verdict in your favor or whatever it is. And so with those 2 things, I was always had the metaphysical side going as well. And then ultimately what happened is I got into real estate. I bought a business, and down the road, the woman who sold me the business, there was a large family conflict. Who do they come at? They come at me, the guy who bought the business, and not the woman who sold it because, hey, she's family. I get it. So I got hit with a big suit, and it took forever to get through that suit. And it was taking on and on and on and on. And at one point, it's interesting, as an engineer, you plan how you're going, you put plans together, you talk, you figure out, I can do this. As an attorney, I'm going to power through litigation because that's what I do. And you power through. At one point, after 4.5 years, you're like, screw this. I am so freaking tired. I'm so done. I am so ready. And we tried everything. We tried so many different things, and we could not get them to the table. We could not find the resolution. We can't move that case. And I finally was so worn. And I said, I'm done. I'm done. And I've got to look for something beyond the science, beyond the legal. And I needed something bigger. And so I said, you know what? I had to surrender, which is funny because later, after I wrote the book and after I started selling the book and talking to people, they're like, have you ever read Michael Singer's book, or Michael Singer, I think it is, yeah, and the Surrender Experiment? And they said, because that's exactly what you were going through. And I'm like, I didn't, but now I did. And so I was gifted the book, and I thought it was amazing. So what happened, again, go back before, and again, I didn't know of that, but I had to surrender. I'm like, I needed to find something beyond me, because what I have done is not working. And everything that it was in my tool chest, everything that life has given me to build up and work through things wasn't working. So I needed something beyond me. And so I said, okay, I'm handing it over. The universe, spirit, whatever, tell me what I can do to help you, but I know that you need to somehow be involved. And in so doing, it was interesting because I heard this, I've spirit guides. And again, I'm metaphysical and I have spirit guides. And they're like, you need to turn to affirmations. And I'm like, what? I don't do yoga. I don't do this. I am great. I am great. I am great. Because that doesn't register with me. It's like, I need something more. And they're like, no, do the research. You are a science-minded legal person. Do this. So I did. I hit the research books. And in so doing, I found I was frustrated because there is not a lot of research in the affirmation books. Everybody wants to give you an affirmation. Everybody has affirmations. Oh, use this and use this. But nobody did the research. And I thought, why is that? I don't know. Could it be because metaphysical folks generally in the older days weren't crossovers? I don't know. All I know is that no one really took the time to ask, has major universities, has major institutions done the research on affirmations? Do they work? How do they work? And I did. So I did what I do, the research, and I did a lot of digging and finding what I needed to do. And in so doing, I was able to find the research to support. Indeed, science has proven affirmations work. They reduce cortisone, the placebo effect, the neuroplasticity and retraining the brain, all these things that are never discussed in these affirmation books. And I'm like, why have we been cheated? So as I'm putting this in my head and I'm working through this, because again, the affirmation worked for me. I created an affirmation. I started repeating it. And in a very, very short period of time, after 4.5 years of nothing, we get a phone call. Hello. Hey, how you doing? They want to mediate. They what? They finally responded after what? Yeah. So we go to mediation, 3 weeks, right? Go to mediation. We're in mediation about 3 hours. We come to a decision, a conclusion. 3 weeks later, we're settling. After that, 3 weeks later, my business, I put it up for sale, wound up getting an amazing amount of money for getting that business gone because I wanted it beyond me. All this. And what changed? What changed? One thing, in my opinion. The time didn't change. Life didn't change. The clock changed. The calendar changed. But guess what? It had been changing for 4.5 years. The one thing that did change is me putting my affirmation down, saying it continuously, believing it when I said it, say it when I mean it when I say it. And in so doing, I affected, in my belief, I affected my environment, my universe, to bend to, not bend to my will, because that sounds very demanding, but to understand that, hey, something had to happen. And it did. And it did. And when we came to mediation, they were negotiable. They wanted to talk. After 4.5 years of stonewalls, nothing in my experience with the law, nothing in my experience with them and with this case can tell me that this changed only because of time, only because of coincidence. It did not happen. Too many things lined up, and they lined up in a certain way to fall the way they did. And Therefore, I needed to share this because I'm like, nobody is talking about this. And they need to understand. And remember, we are coming through COVID. We're coming through all these things, right? And the one thing that we hear over and over again is some of the depression people went into and some of the other things. And I'm like, if they only knew that no matter where they are, no matter what state they might be in, no matter, and I'm talking state of mind, no matter what energy they may have, that if they're reminded their inner goddess, their inner male and female both, inner goddess, your inner goddess, if you tap in you, if you go within, which is a part of the name of the book, the ultimate power is within you. If you start here, the rest will follow. And knowing that we don't need to buy a pill, we don't need to sit on an analyst's desk Davenport or whatever you might call it. Anyway, we don't need to look for a peer group. It's good to have those. And I'm not saying don't, but what I found was if you start here and you generate the power of change here and you put it out to the world, do not be surprised if the universe listens to you, because the universe wants to. Harmony is all, I believe, is what, we find yin and yang, we find balance all the time. The harmony, the spirit and universe want to do that for us. And so when you put it out to the universe and say, I'm ready and I'm working on my part, you help me, boom, we get it. So again, a little bit long-winded, but that's how we got here. My success with that, telling the universe that I've done it, I've been there, I've done the research, know it works, and I've lived it. So now I deliver it to people and say, now I'm giving you the gift, please take it and run with it, folks, run with it. Knowing that, yeah, there's a lot of things you can do otherwise, but if you start here, you're giving yourself that advantage. So there you go.
I love that. That is a very powerful story. And I appreciate it that it's coming from your own personal experiences, that this is something that you used for yourself and could see the actual positive results. It's incredible.
I specifically appreciate the fact that you actually did put in your text the references to where you're getting the information from, like studies and stuff, because a lot of times things like that will like kind of refer to things and they'll say, well, studies will show you this, and then they don't actually bother to tell you where they're getting their information from. And that kind of makes you wonder, did these people really read something, or do they want this to be a thing? But you actually are giving this information. And personally, and I think about this kind of stuff a lot, I think that the vast majority of people kind of it's almost like they need someone to give them permission to take things into their own hands to try to make their lives better in a way. And coming from a different context, because you're not just a writer, you're not just someone off the street. You are someone off the street, but you're also someone who is an attorney, which is a profession that's not really known to have people, prone to flights of fantasy, really. It really, you're supposed to be, paper pusher kind of guy, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and being willing to open up your mind to something like that might mean that someone else will be more likely to take a chance on themselves.
Yeah,
because people I think have a hard time with that.
It's interesting too, because when I did the research, when I wrote the book initially, the book was 35,000 words instead of 22,500 or approximately 22,005. But anyway, and it was full of a lot more research, because that's what I do. And so I had all this heavy research because, again, as an attorney, you have to build your case. So it's first this, and then now you take that and build the next block and the next block. And I went too far. I admit I went too far, and I had it all laid out. And I'm thinking, so I was so proud of my book, and it was 35,000 pages, 35,000 words. And I had my second chapter, my present second chapter was the very last chapter, which is why I did it, which is the first question you asked. But in my mind, it was fascinating because I was writing a book about affirmations, not about Don Rumer-Rivera's journey. And I had it in the back because that's the last thing. I just wanted people, I didn't even want people necessarily, I didn't need to know. So I figured I didn't want to cast them in an idea before they read, and therefore let them see at the end. And so I put it all together, and I was so proud, and I did my introduction. And then a friend of mine, she's like, hey, let me take a look at it. And she And I was like, yeah, no problem. She said, if you don't mind, I'll give you some advice. I said, yeah, no problem. Her husband had some technical books, and so she'd worked with him on his technical books. And so it's funny that she sat down with me. She said, come on over, let's have some lunch, and I'll talk to you about your book. And I'm walking in. I'm just like, okay, right? Because I'd run my Grammarly and I've run the other things and gotten all my grammar done and all that stuff. And then, as attorneys, we learn to write anyway, but sometimes we write a little too attorney-ish. This book is not attorney-ish, I promise. Anyway, so I show up and she pulls out a notebook. She pulls out a notebook and she pops that notebook open. Now we'll start here. And
My
she
goodness.
oh my gosh, like a teacher. I'm telling you, she had she'd gone through it. She read it once and then she went back and and she had torn me a new one. And I thought, I was butthurt. I was a little butthurt, I must admit, But thank goodness, I was also somebody who was open to listening, and her friendship was important to me because I knew it came from a good place. It wasn't just somebody who was like ready to tear me down. And she looked at me, and the very first thing she said is exactly what you said. Why did you write the book? And I'm like, oh, it's in the back. And she said, yeah, but you didn't tell anybody until the end. And most of the time, with all that research, they're not even going to get there. And I thought, what? And she goes, yeah, you have too much. And so she worked with me and she said, hey, you need to do this. And so she gave me from her perspective of what she'd worked with. And she says, my husband's was a technical manual. I don't think you want a technical manual. I said, no, but I kind of want to, no, you don't. So she made me she made me examine what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. And she really made me aware that arrangement and location was important. She made me aware of some things that I needed to be. And so it gave me a second set of eyes. So I went back and I listened to her stuff and I went back and I reread it and I thought, damn, she's right. I was hoping so she wouldn't be, but she was right. So I had to totally rewrite it. And in so doing, one of the things that I did is I wound up getting rid of a bunch of research, which was good. And I mean, the research was good, but it was good not to have it because it didn't need that much. And you could take little bits of leaps and not have every little definitive stepping stone, right? So anyway, so when I got done, I wound up also getting rid of some sites that later on, when my editor wind up saying, hey, you need some sites, I'm thinking, wait a minute, I thought I had sites there. But what happened is I'd gotten rid of them from the previous research. And when it did, it got rid of them for those too. And the hardest thing to do about this entire book was having to go back and figure out where the site was. I knew the sentence, I knew whatever. I'm like, where did I get this? And having to go backdoor a site it's much more difficult than when you're researching and you pull something. You're like, oh, wow, I love this, I'm taking it. And I had to go back through my notes, and my notes are convoluted. And as an attorney, I can tell you my writing sucks. And so if I have to read my own writing a year later, it's very difficult. And so I finally was able to do it, but that was an interesting process to get there. And so in so doing, it wind up making a better book. And it did make me realize that people are going to want to know why. Before you tell me all this thing, tell me why, because I want to understand why you wrote it. And so, and when you asked that first question, I thought, well, that's exactly the sentiment that she asked me when I first had the conversation. And so, and I acknowledged her in the book too, because again, she did that wonderful thing for me.
Yeah. Jonathan and I are both writers too. And, I watch a lot of like YouTube videos about writing and stuff like that. And there's one person who always says like, why does it matter? Like, and she's talking about it a lot of times in fiction, but I think it applies too for nonfiction as well. As like, you have to kind of, before you completely lay out your case, why does this matter? Why does this apply to other people? So
yeah,
I can appreciate the journey that you went on.
Exactly.
For sure.
And I was fortunate enough to have a second editor, which is Jonathan, to look at the book for the development and flow, which was important because after I had rearranged everything and done so, I then needed somebody who really understood books to get it from a different point of view. And so I was so fortunate to put it in his hands and have him then usher it through that cycle, which was wonderful.
I was definitely glad to be in a position to be able to do that. I really enjoyed going through this and seeing your perspective on these things for sure. And I actually have recommended it to multiple people who I think are kind of interested in the idea of something like that, but it's hard to. Usually, this kind of stuff, it's really hard to give somebody a text to start with that's not going to like require them to have years of knowledge of esoterica in some way or another. And I think that you achieve not needing that. And I don't know if that was your goal or not, but I think it's a very positive thing because some people have to have a starting point.
Yes.
And I think this would be a good point of that. A lot of times I'll recommend to people like Miss Horowitz's stuff because he also tries to take a tack of not assuming that you know something.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of writers are not good at that. But I think you nailed that for sure.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Let me ask you this. I've been curious about this ever since I started reading to edit your book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Obviously you've got this the dichotomy in your life of being of having like the kind of I like the term esoteric thought. Some people don't like that. Everybody's got a different way that they like to phrase these things. But so for you, where did that kind of thought process start for you? Like how do you where's your background start on the kind of the less mainstream way of looking at life?
Well, I'm blessed. I am blessed to have a great set of parents who allowed us to just be, just be. You know, we weren't helicoptered. We didn't have. I didn't have a tiger mama. I didn't have helicopter parents. I didn't have the. They just said, you know what? As long as you're not offending people, as long as you're not, doing stuff that's driving our neighbors. I grew up in the inner city. I grew up in Baltimore City, and inner city. And as an inner city kid, I don't know if either of you had that experience, but as an inner city kid, your parents are not the only ones that raise you. Your neighborhood raises you. The old ladies in our neighborhood were our parents too, because if you did something, I was born on Gilmore. I grew up on Gilmore Street, right, which is not, the name is not important, but Gilmore Street, and then I had some friends on Stricker Street, which is 2 streets down, right, and it's all row houses, and row houses on both sides face each other. You can do something on Stricker Street, and by the time you got back to Gilmore Street, which is 2 blocks away, the old ladies and the network had already told your mom. So when you walked up to the door and she's standing there and she's tapping her foot, you're like, how did she know? Because the network worked, okay? Or and at that time we had policing that was neighborhood policing, and the police, they'd pick you if you did something, and he didn't like what you did and it wasn't too severe. But, you see him coming up with you and going, and he's like, knock on the door, and he would stand down, and and the parent and the mom, and she's like, oops, the worst offense is having to bring a cop to bring you home, and again, it wasn't big things, but for us it was big. But we had neighborhood policing, so we all knew the police, we all knew everybody else, and so when the police guy brought you home, there was a favor to you to realize, let's not do this, because you could get down that slippery slope, and it was a favor to your parents and whatever, and it was wonderful. So they gave me the freedom but the neighborhood also, again, raised us up, and it gave us the opportunity to be ourselves, to be free within limitations. And then my mom was gifted, is still gifted with this amazing ability to know and to hear and to see. And when I say that, I mean know things, hear things, and see events before they happen, as they happen. And I remember one event very clearly. It's the one that's kind of always etched in my brain. And that is that we were all, as kids, my mom was quite young, and we were all like, she was just fun. She was a fun mom. And so one day we came home from school, and she was upstairs and she was doing something in the bedroom. She was wrapping something. We came up and we started joking and stuff, and we're all wrestling on the bed. And all of a sudden my mom reaches over and grabs the phone, but the phone's not ringing. And I'm like, we're all, what's that about, right? My mom says, hello, what happened? And sure enough, my aunt is talking to her on the other side, but yet the phone did not ring. But my mother knew, and my aunt was calling to say that my one of my other aunts had been in a car accident. My grandmother was in the car, and my grandmother was severely injured and is in ICU. My aunt did not make it, and so forth. And my mom's like, we're getting in the car and we're going, and she knew this. She knew this because of that bond. And it's interesting because that bond to this day, if I'm not feeling well or she's not feeling well, I can call her. I'm like, what's up? Why aren't you? What's happening? Or she'll do the same. We have that bond. And so she gave me the gift I believe that gift is we all have it already. It's just that my mom allowed us to not have to poo-poo it and say, oh, it doesn't exist, and you're doing something evil, whatever. No, it's just the energy. Again, it's tapping that energy source, which I talked about initially, and understanding that we are energy. We have an energy field around us, and we can feel energy when somebody sends it. And so that's where that came from. And in so doing, it allowed me to play with that a little bit. But when you get into the sciences and the engineering, and you get into the sciences behind law, which is not really science, but it's a legal science. Anyway, the point is as you get into those do not resonate well in that field. And so I just kind of put it on the side, and some people knew about it, but most people didn't. And I didn't really work to develop it as much, but I also didn't ignore it. So I would play with it, and I would make sure I used it. But down the road, then when I felt like it's time for me to really put it back into the forefront, I was able to bring it back and grow it quickly. So I think to answer your question, I think I did, but in a roundabout way. It was always there. In other words, and I believe it's always in all of us. I just think that a lot of times society and religion and all these things that we put ourselves in these boxes with, they tend to tell us to hush and we're crazy. And like our kids, as kids, sometimes kids say, hey, I have an invisible playmate. Well, sometimes that's a spirit energy, and it's sometimes they're there for whatever reasons and so forth. And we're told not to. And then we shut that voice down. And we do, and we live happily without it. It's fine, but I'm blessed that I didn't. I'm blessed that I had parents that said, "You do you, just don't do anybody bad."
Mm-hmm. When you were in your science phase of life, engineer and being a lawyer, would you say that it was still present in your life, or do you feel like you had shut it down for a period of time?
No, it was present, but it was something that I didn't tone the voices down. I didn't tone down the connection. Of what I did though is I put it aside. But I do believe, to be honest with you, especially in both of those fields, it came in handy, because there are times where I would have a client come in, and I'm hearing this and I'm thinking something doesn't compute. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not being told something. I know something. And of course, part of it you could say is, your just ability to know. Okay, but how did you know? It could be, our life has brought us so many situations that we've understood that. No, not always. I mean, there are times where I could tell that there are many pieces that were missing that needed to be filled in because they weren't being quite honest, or they were being honest and the person and so forth. And so and also the ways in which you handle a case and you put it out there and get the resolution you want. Because again, I'm like, I let my conscience, I let my, what you want to call it, conscience, I let my spirits to tell me, hey, try this tact. This one we believe is the way to go with this. And then I would try it, and then success would happen. And I'm like, thank you very much. I appreciate that. But I did not introduce that to because I had my own law office at one point. I had 5 attorneys working for me, and I never introduced that to them, because again, each of us practice law very differently, and they do them, I do me. But I use that very often to help me maneuver through a case. And also with engineering, so much came to me and thought, we can do this and we can make this happen. And I wasn't sure how, but I just knew how because I was being directed to do it, and it worked. So in both those fields, I believe it was there, but it wasn't as in identified as such.
Yeah, it was your intuition, right?
Yes.
That was guiding
that's
you.
Easy word. Yep. Exactly.
Another thing that you have mentioned kind of briefly in your and my communication with each other, and I've actually checked out your YouTube channel a little bit. You've got a pretty big field of interest with tarot, and that's an interesting subject for me. And what's interesting to me is that no two people have the same view on divination, cards, any of it. How did tarot come into your life?
Well, I love that aspect of it, because I go back to my mom again. I give her the credit. When I was very young, she went to a tarot reader. We used to have a place in Baltimore, and again, I love that city, and I don't live there, and it's not the same city, but when I lived there, I loved it. And we had a place downtown where you could go and get dinner, and they would come over and read your cards while you're having dinner as well.
Oh,
And
that's
so it was
cool.
very cool. Yeah, it was very cool. It was in Lexington Market, and I can't remember the shop, but Lexington Market was like the farmers market. It was one of these big farmers markets where they brought the fish and right from the docks. They brought the fish, they brought the crabs, they brought the shrimp, they brought all of the veggies as well, because Baltimore, I mean, is right there in the heart of tomatoes and all the fresh, agriculture. Anyway, my mom went and she told me all about it. And then so one time she met this woman who was a tarot reader, and I went with her just that evening, just to kind of watch. And so when we were done, my mom said, "Would you like to have a reading?" And Leigh said, "Well, I don't usually read young children, but this one, I think I will." And so she did, and so she read me, and it was fascinating because as she laid the pieces together for me and kind of told me where I was, what was coming along, it all fit into, over time, it fit perfectly. I mean, she told me everything she told me happened, which was crazy now looking back. At the time, it seemed crazy because I'm thinking, really? A deck of cards, really? And she used regular cards, by the way. She didn't use tarot cards. She used regular cards. It was fascinating. And then, and sure enough, as she said it, because I was very young, I graduated at 16. She told me I would, and I thought, how is that possible? I did. I graduated at 16. I did this, and this. All the things that she said was going to happen, they happened. And at one point we were leaving, and my mom said, she said, "I'm selling my house and we're moving, whatever." And my mom's like, "You should buy this house," as a joke, right? Because I'm 14. And the woman's like, "Oh no, he's gonna live in a much bigger house than this, and he's not even going to be here. So it's, he's going to be," and again, she was right about so many things. Some of them general, of course, some of them very specific, and especially when it comes to the dealing with the military. She saw me working with the military, and I'm like, I'm not going to the military. And yet I wound up at NSA, which is at Fort Meade, Maryland, and working there, and then with the military and whatever. So it's as a contractor. But so that was the first bite. And I'm like, okay, I'm hooked. I like this. I'm fascinated with this. And so I started wondering, how does she do this? And then when I went to work in Montgomery Wards, as I worked my way through school, I was a bouncer at night. I worked at Montgomery Wards, which is a bargain store, a department store during the day. And then I also was a weekend guard at a courthouse, which, again, how does it happen in courthouse and then wind up being the person in the courthouse on the other side? But it's crazy. I did all those things. They worked my way through school. We hear about all the people having to work. I'm like, I didn't mind it. I loved it because I got my education, which is what I wanted. But anyway, so as I did that, I stumbled across a woman who also read tarot cards from a deck, and a deck of cards, not tarot cards, a deck of cards. And she read for me, and she was so right on with everything she said. And so I got stung by it. I'm like, okay, I have the gift already. I have the ability to listen to spirit. Let me try this. And I started doing this. And I got a training deck, and I started doing it. And I'm like, wow, this is kind of cool. I'm getting messages. Okay, so now I need a test case. So then I started test casing my family, and I would read for certain family members, and they would come back, and I'm like, this is what I'm picking up for the next few weeks. And that was my test case. And they'd come back. It did work. You did that. This happened. And so that's how I got bit by it. So I was like, okay, so I got the little nudge. I was like a drug dealer. Here, I'm gonna give you a little taste, and then you're gonna come back. And I did. I loved it more and more. And then I started doing it for friends and family, close friends and family. But again, with my other stuff, I had to just kind of keep it under wraps. And so I didn't make a big issue of it. The psychic stuff, though, which is what I do as well, because again, when I read tarot cards, and I have some here. When you read tarot cards, it's interesting. You like this card here, the Five of Wands. I know we're talking and you can't see this when folks, but let me give you a visual. There are 5 wands, so it's a 5 of Wands, and in this case, it's people struggling. And so when you see that card, it can tell you basically what a 5 of Wands is. And any tarot reader, any person who's picked up a book, can tell you what that means generally. But when you are psychic or intuitive, when you've opened your mind up to listen, intuitively you're told, what does this 5 of Wands mean for this person? Not that their struggle, but how does that struggle relate to them? And then you read it with the cards around it as well. So you make that connection. And once you do that a few times, you realize, damn, I can help people with this. I can do something. And it seems like I've always, in every role I've had in my life, I've always been helping. I've helped to create systems. I helped to create case law and to help people to resolve issues. And now I'm helping them here with their lives, And so the tarot then has come in that same vein, in my opinion, for that same purpose. And so as I read the cards, I learned how to read them based on meetings. And then I let my spirits and spirit guides tell me, oh, well, this may mean that here, but not the same case. Like for me, the 5 of Pentacles is very clearly a grass is green on the other side card. If anybody tells you, it's like they always tell you this. And when I see it, there are times like, no, it means don't go back. Don't look back. Don't go back. Again, it's fascinating. So again, it's that evolution of experience with the metaphysical that brings me that love and lust for this. And then that took me to the mediumship, which is not what you even asked, but that's one of my most wonderful things that I'm doing. And that gives me such comfort as well.
It sounds like you are clairaudient. Is that the primary way that you receive messages from spirit, or do you receive like images or other things that kind of like other ways that your guides communicate with you?
Yeah, I mostly I don't, when I say hear it, I guess I use that word very loosely because it's not audient. I'm actually clairvoyant. I mean, claircognizant. I just know. It's like I'm just given the information, and then it's like boom. It's like I when I say hear it, it's like it's knowing
in your mind.
Yeah, it just comes to me, which is wonderful. And I'm given the information, and it's interesting. I know it's not my information because people will ask you, well, you already knew it, and I'm like, no, I didn't, because when it comes to me in a form that would not generally be my way of thinking, and it comes to me sometimes in terms that I do not know and would not know. And then I have to sometimes figure out what it is, and I'll tell them what it is, and I'll look it up later thinking, what was that term? I'm curious what I'm saying here, because there's sometimes I do get things that, again, I would not have said that, I would not have gone there, and I wouldn't have said it in that way. But I know that this is how it's meant to be said. And I even tell them sometimes, I'm like, let me be clear to you. When I'm saying this, I need you to understand it's this way specifically. I'm saying this because this resonates with you. And I'll do it. And they're like, oh my gosh, yes, that's exactly. I've been told that specifically for a few times or many times or whatever. And so in so doing, I'm told why. I'm not told exactly sometimes why it has to be that way, but I'm told do it that way. And I listen. And then I do it. And then I get confirmation back. They're like, oh, yep, that's exactly why. Or my dad said that. My dad used to tell me that same phrase and it drove me crazy, So it's kind of like, it's that way. Yeah. So it comes to me, clairnaudience. Now, with the mediumship, it does come, sometimes I do see spirits. And sometimes I know that they're there, and they do have, I'm not empathic. I've turned that off immediately. I don't even allow that. But I do often get a feel when the spirit comes in, if I get really warm, that means it could be a male or female, older male, younger male, or a younger female. An older female always comes in and I'm cold. I get a very chill over me every time, and it does not fail. And so when I'm feeling a spirit, that's my confirmation. As soon as because I'm like, I'll feel, I'm like, okay, I'm getting this information. And all of a sudden I'm like, okay, yeah, somebody's here. And then every once in a while they'll appear. I was giving, if I could go a little bit longer on that, I'll give an example. I was doing a psychic fair months ago, and this couple came over. They were referred by another reader on the other side of the room. And I thought, why would they send them to me? I don't question, because, again, you never know why. You just take them in. They sat down and they said, what do you do? I said, I do tarot readings. And I was like, okay. And so I started shuffling the deck, and I looked up, and there's this young boy, maybe 12, 13, standing beside the woman. And I'm like, do you mind would you be okay if we maybe did a mediumship read too? And she's like, yeah, no problem. The husband and wife are sitting there. And I said, did you lose a child recently? A male? And the tears started coming down, and she reaches over, grabs her husband, and you could see him holding back as well. And they said, yeah. And I said, a son, yeah. And I said, is he like, again, 12, 13? She said, yeah. And I said, and I'm like, dude, we need to not go. I don't have to go there. And she's like, no, that's why we came to you. We were drawn to you because the guy on the other side said, if anybody could bring them in, you could be the guy. So I start talking to her about what he's saying, how he was an artist. The kid had this amazing artwork, and he showed me on the coffee table, the artwork. He talked about his illness. He talked about brain cancer. He talked about some things. The dad was not quite on board yet. The dad was kind of still a bit hesitant about, hey, who's this woo-woo guy? And he's kind of crazy, but the wife is okay with it. So, he's like, okay, dear, you do what, you can tell that kind of energy, right? And so finally the son says, Dad's not getting it. So let him know that he wasn't there when I died. And I'm like, ooh, that's kind of harsh, you know. And I'm thinking to myself, you know. And I said, look, remember, I am delivering the message, and this is not meant as a judgment, but he's trying to let me know, Dad, you weren't there when he passed. Mom's like, no, he was. And I said, oh, I'm just telling you what he said. I'm just giving you what he's telling me, right? And then they start, you know, I said, okay, let's move on. Then it's okay, you know, and I'm trying to just move it on. I don't want to dwell on that because I don't want to get them tied down. And then all of a sudden the dad reaches over and he taps the mom's hand and he says, Hon, I think he's right. And she goes, what do you mean? You were in the hospital. He said, no, I was coming down the hallway. When he left us, I was not in the room. And the kid's like, bingo. So then the dad's now coming on. So then the dad, on top of the artwork, and the dad's like, what's his favorite artwork? And I said, the one over his bed, the one he's showing me with the big yellow face and the blue. The dad's like, yeah, that's over his bed, you know? And so as we got further into it, the dad definitely came along, shall we say, and the kid talked about it. And the reason why the parents needed the kid to come in, and the reason why the kid came in, was to tell them they were carrying such guilt that they may not have made the right choices in healthcare. And they were thinking something could have been done differently. And what happened is the talk would have probably taken place, but he had brain cancer. And so when the tumor shifted or something like that, I don't know all the story, how it worked, but I know that things shifted overnight for him and he could no longer speak. So they couldn't have the conversation that they figured they knew they would have eventually, but they didn't think it needed to be then. And unfortunately, they didn't have it. So they wanted to confer to him that, you know, they felt, you know, they needed to know. And he was like, you did everything you could have done. And then I had to help them understand. And I think they did get this point, is that his life journey was at 13. He didn't come here for further. Okay. And this is a leap for folks out there right now. You're probably saying, what the hell is he talking about? What I'm talking about is, this kid came into this world to carry that burden, and this was his life path. And he had some exits built in. And he told me, he said, I died at 8 and I came back. I almost chose to leave at 8 when my exit was built in, but I chose not to. I stayed on through. And I asked him, I told him, as he's telling me he died at 8 and he came back. And they're like, that's true. He did. They had to resuscitate him. So, and he had, so again, they gave confirmation. He gave them, and again, when I do mediumship, it's confirmational mediumship. I give them specifics, something that you just can't pull out of, you know, you have to be getting it from someplace. And that's the young kid standing beside them. And he told them that he had died, you know, he died and came back, and they're like, yeah, he did. And they explained that. And I explained to them that he chose them as parents. That was a choice before he came in, because he knew they would do the great job they did, and that they did the best they could not have changed anything. Nothing they would have done would have changed things. So when they left, they felt a lot of relief, because again, they were carrying that burden. Did they do enough? Did they do too little? And that's the burden that most parents have. But he needed them to know that was never going to be different than 13. And it's interesting. One other thing that I failed to mention as I was talking is that I looked at her and I said, your grandmother looks like this, right? And whatever. He says, yeah. And I said, because he's telling me that she was with him from birth. And she's like, but he never knew her. I said, no, he didn't need to. He didn't need to. Your family's all around you. They're there. She came in with him knowing he would have a very hard life. And I said, and then he tells me, he said, I told my mom. And so I said, well, but he told you. She said, yeah, he did tell me, but I didn't. It's a kid. I didn't think he was really seeing my grandmother, because again, I did not know her. And I mean, he did not know her. And I said, yeah, but he's letting you know that she was there. She walked through his life with him. And she's like, you know, that makes sense, because my grandmother would do that. My grandmother would do that because my grandmother adored me. And so it was wonderful for her to even get coverage, get some closure, not only to that part of it, but to all of it, to know that she was the mom that he needed her to be. He was the dad that he needed him to be. And ultimately, that no matter what they would have done, his life path ended when it was ending. And that's the way it goes. So to me, that moment, that experience made me so fired up and ready to embrace the mediumship, because I was able to give something to somebody, to this couple who are wonderful people who needed to hear it, that not most people could do. And more importantly, that they came to the right place at the right time for it. And they needed it. And when you can help somebody on that level, I mean, that's such an emotional level that's so deep. I mean, and I felt like, damn, this is what I was meant to do. I was meant to be able to help. And now I found a new way to do that, you know? So it goes back to all the counseling and stuff I've done in my past. It kind of just all comes right back to it.
Yep. I mean, that's a very powerful and beautiful story. And I feel like, a lot of times some people in the metaphysical field do talk about soul contracts. And that's what I'm hearing from this story, is like, we each have a soul contract. And so when we pass on, it's like, that was our time. We came in knowing, like, this is how our life is going to go. This is how our life is going to end. And I think it really can help. That perspective can really help people with grief, of the questioning of the why, and the, could I have done something different? Should I have done something different? So I think you gave that family like a beautiful gift of shifting that perspective, from the guilt and the pain to, on a spiritual level, this is what not just him, but on a spiritual level, those parents signed up for that experience as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. And the other thing about that too is that, it's I always remind people that I read that I'm just the vessel. I am merely the vessel, and I am blessed to be that interpreter, that vessel. But the good part is that the message they're getting is received when it's meant to. And that's how they should walk away. When they walk away, is knowing that they were given the message when they were ready, or when it was their time to receive it. Because there are times that we receive messages and we are not ready for them, and we ignore them. And later on, we're like, if I'd only listened. And I'm sure we've all said that, if I'd only listened, if I followed my intuition, shall we say, my conscience, whatever you want to say, and we didn't. And we ignored the message, but we were maybe not to know it or not to listen at that time, because we needed a different lesson. And it's one of those things they tell you about it. It's like spirit talks to you, and they kind of like tap you on the shoulder a little bit, and then they smack you upside the head a little bit, and then they get a 2x4 out and they smack hard until you finally listen, and you're like, okay, I get it now. I'm going to listen this time. So that's the lesson that we all, from time to time, will face, and even I do it. There's times where I don't listen, and I'm like, I pay what's called stupid tax, and sometimes it's stupid tax.
So with these kind of conversations you had with folks who have passed on, kind of glimpses behind the scenes, maybe, do you get a feeling of what happens after? Like, where are we going somewhere, do you think? Like, what is the end game here?
To be honest with you, from what I have experienced, and I'm only going by what I've experienced and when I speak to these spirits on the other side and things like that. Sometimes, again, they come in only for that moment and they don't stay. They come in to tell a story. Other times, when I'm alone, I can speak to them and they'll come in and we'll have conversations. And we had a spirit in the house. His name was Samuel, and Samuel came into our home with a piece of furniture. We love antiques and we love very eclectic stuff, and so we bought an eclectic piece from a South Carolina estate. Well, Samuel came in with that piece. And it's interesting, I did not know Sam. And here I'm supposedly connected, right? I should know everybody, any spirit that's in the house, but that doesn't work that way. Again, because of spirits in your house, you may never see them, but somebody else may, because again, it's whom they want to communicate with. So for 3 weeks in a row, the ladies who cleaned my house, they on the third week, they finally told me fantismo, and I'm like, okay, spirit, a ghost. And they're like, it's in the room. And so I'm like, the spirit in the room, he doesn't show himself. And now I'm a little insulted. I'm like, how dare he not come into my house and not tell me, right? But so it's interesting. I wondered why. And so I was telling my friends, I have a mentor. I told her, and I said, what do I do? And she said, have you talked to him? And then, of course, then I'm like, okay, now I feel like a dumbass because I should have thought about that, right? But I didn't. I was like, wait a minute, I need to know what to do. Have you asked him why he's there? I'm like, I didn't even think about asking him what that. And then I'm talking to a good friend of mine who I go live with on Wednesday nights, and we do the tarot cards and mediumship with. And she's like, she was shooting off like 10 billion questions to me. I said, you want to come over, don't you? And she said, of course I do. I'm just waiting for the invitation. I'm like, so she came over. She spent about an hour in the room because I couldn't connect with him, but she instantly connected with him. And she had this long conversation with him. She asked him all these questions. So I then came back into the room, and she said, his name is Samuel. Samuel's here. Samuel came from that piece of furniture. And he's here because he was a butler in this house, and that's why he stands in the corner. He said you saw some movement in the corner, the shadow, but you didn't know what it was. And I said, yeah, I know. I always see that, but I figured something would eventually tell. And he said, that's him, because that's how the butler would stand. He would stand in the corner. He would be invisible. He was never part of the room because he was not. He was, again. That's just the way our society was back then. So so it's funny. And he said he's very drawn to you. But he talked to the ladies because he felt he was on their level. He's not on your level. And I said, why? And she said, remember, he comes from a different generation, a different time where he saw himself more connected to the ladies who clean the house. So he saw them and they saw him and they were okay. And then I'm okay. And he said, but he is drawn to you because he said, you sit in that same chair all the time when you come in the room. And nobody else in our house. I mean, very few people. We have 3 people in our house, right? So nobody knows this. But when we sit in the room, I do sit in only one chair. And so he was talking about that, and he was talking about that and about me, and he was telling me about how I sit there and what I do. And I'm like, wow, geez, yeah, he does. He's there. So we were talking. So Samuel, with one of those spirits, and so I got to know a little bit about him. But when he left that night, Angie told him, my friend Angie said, you can't stay here. You gotta go wherever you're going to go. But I don't know where you're going to go next. And the next morning she wakes up and Samuel's with him, and he's been with her the entire time since. And he's very grandfatherly, and she loves him. So for her, having Samuel gives her a comfort. So she took my Samuel. Okay. But again, the spirits I talked to go back to where we were going, because I was going with a point here, and that was going to answer your question about spirits on the other side. What happens is and again, this is like a leap of faith for people to understand this. We are this physical body while we're here on earth, and we are just a vessel. Again, back to the conversation about vessel and tools and so forth. And think about it this way. Say there's a little silver thread that connects me to this like ghostly kind of figure that is my physical body, but like transparent. Everything that we do and learn here, it gets put into this little energy here, the energy me, right? And so when we die, that cord's cut. Remember, we are energy, right? And it's interesting how if you test our body for energy on the voltmeter and the ohm meters, there is energy there. But when we're dead, you touch the same thing, there's nothing. And my belief is that energy exists because of that cord. When that cord's cut, that energy then goes. That energy takes back, and it's kind of like for the folks who are too old, too young, you may not understand this concept, but it's kind of like the DVD or CD player in a writable CD or the cassette player. It goes back to the other side. It is already that energy anyway. It goes back and it goes into our records, and it becomes one of our additional lessons. And so, or a few lessons, because usually we learn 2 or 3 lessons each time we come in. Those pop in place, and they are then added to our library of lessons. And what we do is we come back over and over again, and to be our highest and best self, to be that ultimate energy that can, to be whatever that best is, whatever that best might be. Everybody, I'm sure, has a different concept of that. And so that's why we come back every time, is to learn more lessons. Subconsciously, we know them. Consciously, we don't necessarily. And then so that cassette, that DVD, whatever, goes back there, plugs in, and it becomes part of that experience and that database. While we're there, sometimes, though, we don't want to come back initially. Sometimes we don't want to be back here, but sometimes we want to be actively involved. So we come back as a spirit guide, and we help our past loved ones and friends and whoever else we believe we can help. We come in to help them. And we serve that role. It seems like we're always, though, in some kind of service or to help or to assist, because it's like, again, it's an energy that needs to be flowing. And so I believe that's what we see. And there's other energies up there that do other functions and roles as well. And there are some people who come in back in this way as gatekeepers and not to muddle the waters. But a spirit guide comes and goes throughout your life. You don't have your, and this is just my belief from what I've been talking to spirits, you don't have the same spirit guides all your life. Spirit guides come in and they leave based on your needs. If you have a need for a spirit guide that has maybe some math abilities or counting because you're going through a math crisis or a budgeting crisis, they come in and they help you through that. But then they go because they don't serve another function. That's what they do. And then you call in other spirit guides that do those things. The gatekeeper is the one spirit that's with you from birth to death. And that is the one that keeps a fence around you. And it's not really a fence, but I'm giving a visual here. They create a wall, a fence, a barrier that says they control access. You tell them what to do, though. You tell the gatekeeper what to do. And then the gatekeeper then listens to you and allows the spirits to come in and leave and do as much impacting as you want based on your wants, wills, and desires. And if you're somebody who doesn't really deal with it much, the gatekeeper then is kind of helps to control that for you. But if you're somebody who already connects to spirit guides, then they can be crazy sometimes. And also when you're a medium, the spirits can come in anytime they want. So my gatekeeper has a very specific role in the evenings because she knows very clearly, I do not allow any spirits in my bedroom. I've given up on that unless I ask for a resolution or I need some clarity. And so what happens is if I say I'm having an issue, like when I was writing the book, I'm like, I need something to fill this. I need some void in here because something doesn't line up. And I would say, spirit guides, can you run out and somebody bring in a specialist that knows this, bring them into me so I can have the information and know where to find it. And then I will say, and then I tell my spirit guides, help me remember tomorrow what I'm learning tonight, what I need to know from tonight. Because again, when you wake up, a lot of things we lose instantly. We lost it. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. But if you tell the spirit guides to help you to remember tomorrow what it is that you needed to know tonight, it does work. And then in the morning, I'm remembering what I need to know. And so sometimes it would take 1 or 2 nights. Those spirits can then come in because the gatekeeper is aware that I've asked for that help. But other than that, I couldn't sleep for a long time. And I'm like, why can't I sleep? And I realized as the more in tune I got, the more open I got, the more then the spirits realize, hey, I'm able to talk. And they wanted to come and talk. And I'm like, hello, y'all don't need rest. I do. I need my 8. I need a serious 8 of sleep. And so the gatekeeper was very good in that way. So that kind of defines what a gatekeeper is. Again, that's a lifetime commitment. And they're with you from birth to death. And then the spirit guides come and go as you need them and as you call them in. And some of them will be there over and over again. And so I hope that kind of answered the question there.
Absolutely. And it sounds like what this is all done by choice. It's all consensual on the parts of the spirit you're talking about. Like nothing's being forced to do anything. It's they choose to do what they're doing.
Yes. And I think it's, and not only is it a choice, but it's an honor for them. I think mm-hmm. they want to be in use. They want to be in service. They want to be helpful. And and again, maybe it's part of them fulfilling their contracts as other things they learn, because in teaching that helps to fill those things without having to come back. They still, by teaching, are fulfilling certain things that help them be the highest and best self. You know what I'm saying? So sure. I think it's additional roles that help to round them out, and not just lessons they learned here, but lessons, and also the lessons they learned, then they can come back and help us learn from their lessons. And maybe it hones their lessons as well that they've learned because they're seeing it, how it funnels through to us.
You had mentioned at the beginning about like the way affirmations work, you're kind of tapping into your inner goddess. So can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by that, and what exactly is your inner goddess?
Well, to me, the inner goddess, again, is that power within us, that spark, that whatever it is that we often, again, it's interesting. Again, we have become a society where, again, we're looking for the outside. We're looking for something outside of us, external to us, to help us resolve things and to fix things. And the goddess inside of us is that core, that core energy, that core self that we often have been beaten down by. Not by, something by is not the right word. We've had it beaten down in us. And so it's like, when people cast aspersions and when the negative self-talk, and then us, the images that we don't fit and so forth, and we quiet that voice inside us. We dampen it down because it takes our spirit away. It takes our energy away. And that energy is still there. It's just that sometimes we mute it or we put it in this thing because we're like, oh, I can't let my light shine. I can't do this. And there's many metaphors I can throw out to understand what I'm trying to say. But the goddess is that voice inside, that one core that is our true core belief, our true beliefs, our true energies, our true thoughts that know who we are. And sometimes it's the dark spaces we don't even want to go to, because sometimes we're like, I don't want to admit that about myself. I don't want to admit that I'm maybe weak in this regard or whatever. It's all that. And so it's that inner core of who we are and our being that often we don't want to shine and show people because we're not quite confident, or for whatever reason, or those of folks who, man, they let it shine. They're like, oh, woo, do this, I'll show it to everybody, like flasher, woohoo, And so, and I have been on both sides of that myself. And so that inner goddess is that power that when we, again, quiet our mind, and when we allow ourselves to listen to silence. And I know that sounds very oxymoron, because silence isn't noise, but silence is deafening to some people. They fear silence because of what's not there. And they're like, I can't go to silence because now I'm having to face me. And that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing sometimes to face you. And so when you get silent, all of a sudden you have to be sometimes distracted to be silent, because your mind won't stop running. And mine is that same way. I had to do a candle experiment. What I did is I created this experiment, and it works for me. And I now teach it to a lot of people. And I get a long tapered candle, and because the candle is not the key, I light the flame, make sure it's a dark space or a darkened space, quiet, not disruptive. I make sure my phone is away, because you have to have the technology gone and that kind of stuff, because you don't want distractions. You don't want to, but I do set a timer, but I make sure I cannot see the timer. And then I lit the candle. And for 7 days straight, I did this for 5 minutes each day, 7 days straight at the same time. And the first 2 days, I'm like scratching and itching. What I was like, is it time yet? Is it time yet? And and it's like, okay, beige. I'll paint the ceiling beige. It's like your mind still can't help it. But as you focus on that flame, which is what I teach everybody, focus on that flame and solely the flame. Even if you have to go, okay, how tall is it? Is it blowing left? Is it blowing right? I don't care. And now analyze the flame as much as you want, but it's the flame. And as you do that on the second day, your mind quiets some more. The third day, the flame is impressive. The fourth day, you see the blues and the oranges and the whites in the flame. The fifth day, it's a flame. The sixth day, your mind is quiet. And the seventh day, usually at that point, you now control your mind. And now you're able to say silence, and the mind listens. And then you connect and you find that energy and you find that spirit. And then you go to that space where you are afraid to go sometimes. And then you deal with it. And then you learn how to love it, to embrace it, and then to put it to use, which is wonderful. So again, sometimes the silence can be scarier than the noise, because in silence, we find that inner goddess, and she's there. And we're like, I'm afraid sometimes of what she may be telling me.
That's true. I mean, it sounds like to me, I think a lot of people would refer to that as like your higher self,
Yes.
or I call it authentic self. So, but I think we're talking about the same thing. It's like the most true, spiritual, loving part of yourself. And I agree. You don't always like what they have to say.
Yes.
But in my experience, connecting with my own authentic self, it's always comes from a place of love. It is always a kind, even if it's not what I want to hear, it's said in a kind and compassionate way. There's not judgment. There's not, anger or, blame or shoulds or anything like that. It's always just very loving.
And it's also, if I could go one more, it's enlightening.
Sure.
Because sometimes we see things through our prism of our society or whatever else, right? And then your inner goddess or your self, whatever, your higher self, it tells you maybe you should look at it through this prism. And therefore it comes across a little differently. You're thinking, wow. And two things can be true at the same time. That's the one thing that I just get so frustrated with people from time to time, because I'm talking to them and they see you can only be this or this. And that's not the case. You can have this and have the number 2 as well. And they are, again, both reality at the same time. It sometimes is based on how we perceive it, or sometimes how we receive it, and then how we deal with it. And so again, it's amazing how we often find ourselves fighting with ourselves, because our inner goddess, our higher self, is saying, why don't you flip the script? And this goes back to my argument that I often say to people: is it an obstacle or an opportunity? It can be both. It can be both at the same time. But how you perceive it goes back to my book. I'll go right back to that book. Is that neuroplasticity of changing your brain, because we are historically and chemically we are prone to go to the negative first. And that is proven in science, that we are pre-programmed to go negative first. And when we use the neuroplasticity, the ability of our brain to retrain the brain to see things in a positive light first, which is very opposite of what we naturally do, that we then can see the positive side of something. And I'll give you an example. This is something I've said often. You drive down the road, you have your kids in the back of the car, you're doing a good speed, and all of a sudden you're tired and you have to get the kids to school or whatever, right? Your tire blows out. You navigate across 3 lanes of traffic, you pull off the road, you get out of the car. What do? Are you fuming? I cannot believe this. This always happens to me. Whatever. You go around, you see the tires blown. Oh my God, the rubber's just torn away, whatever, right? Or do you get out of the car, you look behind you, your kids are safe. They're okay. They don't even know what's going on. You're happy. You get out of the car, you walk around, you're like, oh, thank goodness, the fender's not destroyed. The car's not messed up. The rim is not even messed up. Okay, the tire's eaten up, but okay, who cares? I'm alive. I'm healthy. I was able to navigate that car. Both things are the same, right? Both things did happen in your mind. Both things are real. It is frustrating, but how we react to it has helped us to, again, take that situation and find it as a benefit. Okay, thank goodness the tire blew at a time where I could take care of it and no one was hurt. Thank goodness that's been resolved, because it could have turned into such a different, if it was busy traffic, I could have hit a car. I could have done so many things, and the lives behind me are still intact. How wonderful is this? And then you take that same message and you then have somebody pull up and they want to help you. If you're fuming and you're just seething, you tap their energy. You now have changed them, because now they're negative because they felt your negative energy. It's like when you walk into a negative room or a positive room, you know it. You know what I'm talking. Everybody knows. It's like, wow, this room is like heavy. That's the energy I'm talking about. We feel that. We do. And so then you just change this guy who's now wanting to help you, this female or man who pulled up. You just change them into a negative. However, if you're positive about it and they walk up and they're positive, then that ripple effect is you've created 2 positive energies to move forward. It's amazing how 2 things can be true at once. It's how we react to them that can determine how it moves forward with us, for us, and with them.
Yeah. I think it's a powerful perception shift when you can stop asking, like, why is this happening to me? And why, instead of, and shifting it to, why is this happening for me? And that's exactly what I heard you say. Yeah.
Yep. And that's the one good thing, again, about the book. When you talk about there's many good things about the book, of course, but one of the benefits is understanding the neuroplasticity, that you can teach an old dog new tricks, because they say you can't, they can, you can. Yeah. And so when you learn about that neuroplasticity and you learn about how we hold on to our anxiety through the cortisone and how the cortisone levels are high, and when you start practicing affirmations, you bring down cortisone levels, and those then get rid of the stress and the anxiety and the aches and the pains. How when you're dealing with the placebo effect with that affirmations bring, the historically proven, again, science behind the placebo effect, and how if we believe we are better, we are better. How we can actually help our health, and we can help the doctors and help everybody else to help us overcome our illnesses based on just the placebo effect alone. And again, it's a proven effect. It's proven in science. So it's amazing how the book helps you to make that roadmap, gives you a roadmap, and it says, okay, we're starting from here. I'm giving you, I tell you what happened to me. I've given you the science to say it does work, and this is the historically proven science behind it. Now I'm going to give you the keys on how to create your space, how to clear it, how to make sure that you cleanse it with energy, how you can bring things into it, like natural things, to help you get your space ready, get your mind ready, get your technology out the door so it doesn't impact you. Then I help you in the book how to phrase, how to write your affirmations. And then I also remind folks, test your affirmations. If you write an affirmation and then you say it and it seems hollow, you're not there yet. You're not ready yet. Make sure you do it. And then I also give the specific ways in which you make sure your affirmations fit this. Again, it's present tense, positive. Make sure it's specific and it's personal. It's got to be personal to you and specific. If you take somebody else's affirmation, tweak it, make it specific to your own. And then when you start repeating them, then I teach them how to set the ritual up to then repeat them and start doing them. And then I remind them, always be grateful, always give thanks to Spirit. If you're asking Spirit to help you, the least you could do is say thank you, because it's going to happen, in my opinion, and it does happen. I've been blessed that way. And I believe anybody who does this through the book will understand why that works, and they'll do it and they'll see why they should say thank you as well. And then the mindfulness. The mindfulness is super important, because the mindfulness is always being in the present sense, being in the present moment, being positive, because that present moment positiveness that comes with mindfulness, and it's a whole practice around it, but that's the key to it, is the present minded, positive sense. And that goes back to what we talked about, the car accident, the wheel blowing out, it's that present mindfulness. If you were not in that, then mindfulness would have taken you mindfulness would not have been useful, and you would have went in a different direction and would have been crazy. So the book helps you do that. And then, so it kind of, in the end, it wraps it up clearly. And it says, you know what, more importantly, this is a journey. This is not just a moment. This is a journey. And it's going to be a lifetime commitment to you to learn to stay in the positive mindset, to learn to stay in that. And then it's easier the more you do it, because as you do it and the mind starts changing, man, I'm telling you what, it's easy to go positive. And I will throw myself out there. I'm living proof.
Yeah.
If anybody watches my live stream on Wednesday or Wednesday night or Thursday morning, they will see I'm generally a very positive spirit out there, because I'm blessed. I am blessed to have the gift of speak. I speak relatively well, I think, in that sense, so I can communicate well. And the gift of having the information flow to me to give it out. So again, Spirit has been blessed to give me that gift as a translator, as a mechanism to be able to give that energy to other people. And so it does work. It does work. So buy the book.
Absolutely. We will link it in the show notes. What is the name of your YouTube channel, and what exactly are you doing during your live streams?
It's Sonoran Mystic Tarot. Sonoran is the desert I live in. It's here in Arizona. And mystic, of course, because I believe, because I've always believed this is all mystical.
Yeah.
And then tarot is the base of what I do. And so Sonoran Mystic Tarot on Wednesday evenings, starting at 6-ish on Arizona time. Arizona, we don't change time. So 6 months out of the year, it's Pacific time, and 6 months it's Mountain time. But anyway, we run from 6 to 8:30 or 9, and we do free tarot readings or free mediumship, whatever comes in. If a spirit comes in that we're reading for somebody, anybody can come on. There's no charge. It's all free. I have a friend of mine, Angie. She and I do this on Wednesday nights. And then on Thursday mornings, my friend Shauna over in Florida, she and I go on together, and we do the same thing. And we start about 8-ish my time, and we run for about 3 hours. But we do free readings. Anybody that comes on, they type in the chat what they want to know. And if we're drawn to them and we feel like the energy's there, we'll do a reading for them. We'll give them information. We'll give them what we can. If we have a number of mediumship, the mediumship is getting really hot right now. And we have a friend who passed about a year ago, and she was part of our collective, and she comes in and she helps us or some spirits in from time to time. So she helps to have them come in. So we do mediumship reads for people, and as well, if they come in, because again, I understand how Hollywood has created this image that you can call in a specific spirit and they'll show up on a dot. Nah, sorry, folks. I hate to tell you.
Yeah.
No, I should clarify. That's not been my experience. It could be true, but it's not been my experience. And all the mediums I know, I guarantee that none of them had the ability to comment, because remember, you're telling some spirit on the other side, you need to be here now. I'm like, if you told me that, I'm like, hell no. How dare you, right? So, but if the spirit wants to come in, they will come in and they will present themselves. And so we do both, and it's free to anybody that comes in. We have a large group of folks. We looked at our demographics, and we can see them. Well, a lot of British people watch. We have a lot of people in Europe, but we have a large population in India that watches. A lot of people in India watches. And even my book has been selling internationally, which is nice. And again, I'm an independent author. I never expected that. but I have sold them in various countries in the U.S. and I mean in the U.S. various countries in the world, and I'm very blessed to have that happen because the people who watch us, they're from all over, and we become like a family. There's a group of folks who come in all the time, and we create like a family, and it is a family. It's a non-blood family in that sense, I guess you would say. But sometimes we create our own families, and I'm blessed to have that. So,
Awesome.
so
Well,
again, Daryl.
as someone who has kind of clicked in and lurked a little bit here and there, I definitely can say that the dynamic is very friendly. It's a very good dynamic. I think it's a cool channel. We'll link to that as well in the show notes. If people are curious, they can check that out too. Do you? I meant to ask this a little while ago. I always ask this question. Do you have a favorite tarot deck?
I have. I have actually, believe it or not, I do have a favorite tarot deck that I like, but it's interesting. Each of the decks for me have a different function. Okay, so for me, the Rider-Waite deck, which is the traditional deck, when I really need specifics, I mean, I need to get something boiled down to specifics, I go to the Rider-Waite. Is my what I call a clarifying deck. So I'll start with the Gilded Tarot, which I love, which is this deck in my hand here. The Gilded Tarot is a deck I love, and I use it for the general readings. But when I really need to get hammered down, I'll take as a clarifying cards. I will take from the Rider-Waite. But my favorite deck is not really a tarot deck; it's an oracle deck, and it is called the Angel Healing deck. And I absolutely love this deck. It is a deck that I turn to. And it's interesting, when I'm doing readings, I'll have 4 decks or 5 decks sitting around me, and I'm being told which deck I need to draw from for that reading. But when an Angel Healing deck comes in, that means somebody is having problems, like emotional problems or drama with family or something. And it never fails. Every time I grab that deck and I start reading it, and they're like, yep. And that's what they needed to hear. They needed to hear about their emotional stuff, where the other tarot decks are usually other things that happen in your world. But when they're really going through some emotional mess, that Angel Healing deck screams at me. And it's like, in a positive way, of course, but it tells me, hey, this person needs this. And that is my ultimate go-to deck. And it's funny because every time I see it at a store, it's out of print. You cannot find it in print anymore, but I go to the half price bookstore here local for a lot of things. And that deck every once in a while shows up, and I buy it because I have a lot of people who say, whenever you can find it for me. I have a long list of people who want it. So I buy it, and then I send it to them, and I scratch them off the list because it's such a wonderful, strong, powerful deck. And that is my go-to, but it's not necessarily a tarot deck. It's an oracle deck, which is a different subset of the whole metaphysical stuff. Tarot is 78 cards. You have the major arcana and minor. Oracle is anywhere between 40 and 50 cards, and they don't have the same kind of energy or meanings as does tarot.
Very cool. Anything else you wanted to ask?
I think we've covered all the things that I had on my list. This has been a really great talk, man. Thank you for hanging out with us for a little while.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me, and I enjoyed that conversation. And I just I'm glad you let me share so much more. I'm glad we didn't. I mean, I love the book, and I love talking about the book, as you can see, because it was a year and a half of work that came to a wonderful conclusion. And when folks see the book, by the way, know that the artwork is mine as well. And so when you look at the book, I know we're doing verbally, but you guys are watching this, so I can show you. It's interesting. I created her first, and she was on a mountain. And this is the inner goddess I talked about, right? But I needed her to have energy, so I had to create so where the hair would then be blowing to show movement. And then I realized she also needed to be grounded, because we all need to ground ourselves, and we often fail to do that. When we're really getting a hit, you need to ground. And so she is now part of the mountain on the cover of the book. So I'm talking about the cover of the book, folks. Around her is the chakra energies, and she's sending that chakra. She has her arms wide because she's sending the energy out, but it's not an aggressive. You notice it's not like up here where she's demanding. She's down here, so she's kind of asking the universe, you see. So it's a very different posture. And the universe, there's a bolt of white coming back down from the top, and it is the universe delivering what it is she's asking for. And if you notice in the way beyond her, it's clear in the energies, and so she's moving to that clarity. And so the book, the images are mine. I created those images and worked a long time to get them to look right. And even the one that I'm really most proud about is under part 2, and it's the alchemy and the alchemist.
Awesome.
I wanted science, and I even had a scientist in mind, but when I started creating this, if you notice when you look at the book, folks, there'll be like the beakers or orbs, and the orbs are again non-traditional and non-specific to timing. And so I wanted a feeling of alchemy and not just science, because I think that this book is alchemy. You're using a mixture of a lot of things to throw together to create this new wonderful way of living and being. And so the artwork, it was was done specifically by me for the book to convey the message of that part. And so I'm as proud of that as I am about the book, because it really does make a statement, and it helps to solidify what it is if you're about to read. And so it's not throwaway. I put nothing in the book that was throwaway. Everything there was intentional, which is again the way I kind of do things.
Yeah. It's a gorgeous cover, and I think it's even cooler that you made it yourself. So congratulations.
Absolutely.
It's very cool.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I've loved this conversation, and I would love to have you back on at some point, because I think there's a million other things that we could talk about.
Oh, anytime. Especially would just set me loose on metaphysical, and I'll as you saw, I tend to and I do apologize for not cutting some of my answers short, but it's hard when I so love what I do, and I so understand it. And that's the one thing is that some people, when you hear somebody talk about something, sometimes we have questions until they can give us a deeper understanding. And that's what I try to do in having these conversations. It's helping people to have a better understanding, to know that it's not just me saying it because I heard it once or I saw it once. It's helping you to understand that I'm coming from a place where I've lived it, experienced it, and have researched it to the point where when I tell you this, you can move forward knowing that it's coming from a base of experience and not just rhetoric that somebody's repeated. And that's so important to me, because I think that unfortunately sometimes we're not given the credibility under the woo-woo factories. It's like they believe we're whatever. And when they finally have a chance to sit and listen to somebody, help them to understand there's a depth to this, that it's not just a feeling, that maybe we can enlighten one person. And if I can change one person with each conversation, then I feel my job has worked and I was successful.
Absolutely, for sure. And honestly, this is the type of conversation that we are here for. And the reason why I kind of ask these questions that are a little bit outside of the stated topic, like, leading you into the tarot thing and the other stuff, is the more because I don't have a lot of conclusions that I draw. That's how I'm the skeptic. Part of the Seeker and Skeptic is I want more information, and I don't really draw a lot of conclusions. But the things that I'm finding out to shape my own opinions in talking to people in this manner is that no matter how many different things you talk about, I think that it's really, be it aliens or spirits or ghosts or any of these things, Bigfoot, any of it, I think it's all different sides of the same phenomenon. And you're experiencing it based on what you're able to grasp with the personality that you have. And showing people that the majority of people who are into these things and experience these things are experiencing it in more than one paradigm can help people understand that they're not crazy. You know what I'm saying? And there's a lot. I think there's a lot of value in that to be able to showcase regular people who have a billion different kinds of jobs and lives that are experiencing things that don't make them crazy.
Absolutely. And that's harder said than done. It really sometimes it goes back again to surrender. If you eventually surrender, if you say, you know what, because again, it goes back to control in that regard. And so, when you surrender, sometimes if you surrender to it and you just let it flow, man, the doors can open, the windows can open, the mind can open, and man, all of a sudden the enlightenment comes. But if we control it too much, if we try too hard and we're like, oh, I can't get myself out of that box, I gotta stay here, and that is our worst. That is our worst impulse, I think, because again, if we open ourselves up a little bit and just say, hey, let's see where this takes us, man, it takes us to the places you're talking about, the many places, which again are all very much connected, but different experiences. But again, seems to be definitely coming from the same place. It's how we all experience it. And just very cool.
It is very cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much, man.
Thank
Have
you
a
guys
nice
for your
rest of
time.
the
I
day.
appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for being here. If you have a strange story you want to share with us, email us at seekerandskeptic@gmail.com. We look forward to talking to you soon.